feeling low.
Hello there, my lemonheads, and welcome back to the Lemonade Stand, or welcome if you are new. My name is Brianna. I'm a certified personal trainer, a big, huge biology nerd, and a registered dietitian to be. I've assembled all of you here today for episode 11 of my ongoing series, True Science. In this series, I combine my love of science with my interest in true crime. Here we talk about everything from doctors that turned out to be frauds, bizarre medical phenomenon, mad scientists, and everything in between. On tap today is a character suggested by someone in my audience, a terrible, terrible woman by the name of Linda Hazzard. A fitting last name, I must say. Before we proceed, if you love science-based health, wellness, and fitness education with lots of lulz and tons of dry sarcasm on the way, why not hit that subscribe button and join the Lemonade Stand, because I would really love to have you here. Without further ado, let's make some lemonade. Also, if I sound a little coughy and congested, it's because 2 weeks ago I caught the bubonic plague. It wasn't the plague, but I was dying and it was terrible. And I tested negative for the flu, Divic, and strep. I have no idea what I had. My doctor had no idea what I had. I would say I'm fully recovered from it at this point, but I just have, that lingering congestion. So if I sound a little nasally today, that's why. There's nothing I can do about it. I'm sorry. So like I said, person on tap today that we're talking about is a woman named Linda Hazzard, and she was suggested to me to do a video on by a YouTube subscriber. So if you're the person who made that suggestion, I hope you're watching this. And yeah. Thank you. So let's start from the beginning. Who was Linda Hazzard? Linda Hazzard was born Linda Burfield in 1867 in Carver County, Minnesota. And as far as her early life, there's not much information I could find beyond that. However, I do speculate that her early life and childhood was at least a little bit messed up. And the reason I speculate that is because of everything that I'm about to tell you that she did later on in her life. I feel like most people who had like a stable, safe, enriching, happy upbringing don't go on to do the things that she did. So when she was 18, she got married and had a couple of kids. And a few years later in 1898, she was like, F them kids, F this husband. And she up and left her family. She was like, I am so sick of wiping your booger faces and folding your giant underpants. I'm gone. So shortly after this, in 1902, she met and married a man named Samuel Christman Hazzard. I keep wanting to say Christmas, hence how she got the name she's known by, Hazzard. So Samuel was kind of a piece of shit, but so was she. So I don't know, maybe it was like a match made in heaven. Samuel Hazzard was described as a drunk and a swindler and a scammer. I wonder if he was in an MLM. So when Sam and Linda met and got married, he had actually already been married twice, which is not a big deal on the surface, right? Because a lot of people have multiple marriages. But I guess it didn't cross Sam's mind at any point to divorce his last couple of wives before marrying Linda, because he didn't. And because of that, he found himself in jail for bigamy. He was in the big house for 2 years, but Linda was ride or die for him, so she stuck by his trifling ass. So after Sam was done serving his time, he and Linda moved to Washington State. So something I don't think I've said yet is Linda was a doctor. And you may be wondering how she acquired the title of doctor. This is a really old case. The research is kind of spotty and ambiguous, but what I could ascertain based on my research is that Linda may have had some sort of training as an osteopathic nurse. However, one source I came across said that she didn't have any training at all in the medical space. So I don't know. But something that I can tell you for sure is that she definitely did not have a medical degree. So she was not a medical doctor. So let's just assume that if it were today's day and age, she would be like a medical medium type. Anyway, whichever of these is the case with her having or not having a nursing background, one thing is for certain based on my research. Because of some bizarre loophole in Washington State's licensing laws at the time, she was able to become licensed to practice medicine in the state. I don't know the details of the loophole. I didn't dive in that far, but basically this loophole grandfathered in a lot of practitioners of alternative medicine, even though they didn't have medical degrees. And they were then given licenses and were then legally able to practice medicine. She'd fit right in on TikTok in 2024. So in terms of Dr. Linda Hazzard's beliefs, they basically encompass that fasting was a cure for everything. I think I featured who was it? Kevin Gates? I think he was in a video a couple months ago who basically said the same thing. He said those exact words, I think. Fasting is the cure for everything.
I'll be honest with you, fasting is the cure for everything.
So Linda was a follower of a medical doctor named Edward Hooker Dewey, and he was a big proponent of fasting. Linda basically took his teachings and ran with them, but she also added the element of fraud and thievery along with it. So building on Linda's beliefs, she basically believed that eating in excess was the cause of most disease and thought fasting would remove toxins and the body would heal itself. She really sounds like a fasting zealot today, doesn't she? What's funny is there is obviously some truth to eating in excess causing disease. I definitely would not say it causes most disease. That's certainly not for sure. But a lot of chronic diseases that we see even today are oftentimes linked to one's diet. So she's not totally wrong. But basically, Mrs. Hazzard said that any illness could be cured by fasting and allowing the GI tract to rest and cleanse, which then removed impurities from the body. I'm using quotes because those are words that she apparently said. According to Dr. Hazzard, the true cause of all disease was, quote, impure blood, end quote, which was brought on by, quote, impaired digestion, end quote. In 1908, she even published a book titled Fasting, The Cure of Disease, which, you guessed it, promoted fasting as the cure for basically all disease. Not a very creative title, but moving on. So that's all well and good. I mean, it's not, but you get it. Linda basically took all of this fasting stuff to an extreme, and it does in fact get worse. Part of her treatments involved daily enemas, which lasted for several hours and used up to 12 quarts of water. She also used massage therapy, but it was very unpleasant. Her version of massage therapy apparently involved her beating her fists all over patients and screaming, eliminate, eliminate, eliminate. And I guess she would scream that like a banshee. It is 100% not funny. But while I was reading that, I couldn't help but chuckle because I thought of how some I don't know, like religious cults or like people who are just, I don't know, like religious officials will sometimes yell, the power of Christ compels you, when they're like exercising an unruly toddler or something like that.
This what y'all do in y'all church? Turn around, friend, gotta make it easy for you. In the name!
Anyway, all right, so let's move on and discuss the crime part of this because there's quite a lot of it. So just like with every insane quack who thinks that they've unlocked the cure to disease, Linda had a lot of people who loyally followed her and were more than willing, at first anyway, to undergo her treatments when they were desperate for a cure for whatever disease that ailed them. And Linda, like most scammers and grifters that we see today, took advantage of those people during a very vulnerable time in their lives in a big way. One of Linda's first known victims was a woman named Daisy Maud Haglund. Daisy was a Norwegian immigrant. Linda put her on a 50-day fasting regimen, after which time she died in February of 1908, presumably of starvation. And during that same year, Linda had two more victims, an Ida Wilcox and a Blanche Tyndall, and then later in 1909, a Viola Heaton. In 1910, Linda went on to starve another woman to death named, I'm sorry, I keep looking down. There's a lot of names here. Maud Whitney, but it wasn't until 1911 until people kind of started to take notice of what Linda was doing. A civil engineer named Earl Edward Erdman started treatment with Linda and died of starvation 3 weeks later. So the news at the time, the Seattle Daily Times published an article titled, Woman, quote unquote, MD kills another patient. And I was saying quote unquote because they put MD in quotes. So they were on to her as well. So from that, she was actually starting to get some negative publicity, but you all know as well as I do that does not stop people from giving these criminals and charlatans their time, money, and attention. In 1911, a law partner named Frank Southland and a publisher named C.A. Harrison, they both embarked on Linda's treatment plan, and they both died a few months later. And it was really this year that Linda started to take her crimes to the next level, and I guess she was like, well, you know what, while I'm here murdering people, I might as well rob them blind too. So an Englishman named Ivan Flux had undergone treatment with Linda, and this involved a 53-day fast. And it was during this time that Linda somehow gained control of his finances and his property. After he died, his family was told, I assume by Linda, that he only had a few dollars left to his name, presumably because Linda took a majority of his estate. How that happened, I have no idea. I don't know. I imagine things like that back during this time were more of a Wild West than there are now. Like there was probably a lot less red tape and stuff for that kind of thing. Like some guy could walk off the street and be like, I'm his long lost brother. And then people would just be like, okay. So this same year, there was another man named Louis Ellsworth Rader, and he actually had more of a name for himself. He was a former legislator and a magazine publisher. So Linda started treating him, quote unquote, at some hotel room. At some point, health inspectors, and I don't know why them and not like his family, but my sources said health inspectors, so they tried to convince him to leave, and they were just basically like, hey, she's slowly killing you. You should eat an apple and get out of here. But this guy actually refused to leave Linda's care. Ultimately, he ended up passing away, and at the time of his death, he weighed less than 100 pounds, and he stood at 5'11". So at some point, the right people were finally starting to take notice of Linda's tomfoolery, and it was the health director of Seattle that finally was like, okay, what's going on over there? But before you guys get all excited, he actually couldn't do anything because Dr. Hazzard was licensed in the state of Washington, remember, because of that loophole. Sorry if you guys keep seeing this glare every time I move. It's just, I have my window open. I have my lights on, but I also like natural light too. So, but anyway, the health director of Seattle, Washington couldn't do anything because, remember, she was a licensed doctor because of that weird loophole I told you guys about before. And also because her patients were willing adults, there was really nothing that he could do. However, the director did apparently say if she found out that she was treating a child, then he would finally step in. So, okay for her to keep killing adults. Great. I'm being sarcastic when I say that, but I do get it. Like, if it's a consenting adult, then there's really nothing anybody can do. Okay, this glare is starting to annoy me. I'm gonna close my blinds. What was going on with all these deaths? Like, where were these people's families, you know? Like, how is she able to do this and kind of basically get away with it? First of all, Linda was apparently treating people in one of two places. It was either a really seedy, sketchy hotel in Seattle or in a cabin on her property. Secondly, when her patients were dying, if she was not the one doing the autopsy, their cause of death was ultimately just listed as starvation. If she did do the autopsy on her own patients, then they died of something other than starvation. Oh yeah, because apparently she could act as like a medical examiner too and do autopsies on her own patients. Convenient. So according to one source I found, the only person under Linda's care who did not die while in this pattern of being starved was a 26-year-old guy named Eugene Stanley Wakeland. He was found on her property with a bullet in his head, and his manner of death on paper was written as self-checkout. I'm sorry, I'm getting kind of tired of the word unalive. I don't know, I'm just getting sick of hearing people say it all the time, and I'm trying to say it less, but I'm trying to find other words to use that are also not like completely insensitive because, you know, I don't want to be a jerk. When I say self-checkout, you know what I mean in this instance, because I'm not going to say the word. But suspiciously, Linda had power of attorney over his entire estate. And she later contacted his own personal attorney, basically just saying that she actually needed more money to cover the mortuary bill. So at this point, her body count is much higher than it should be for anyone, but it was really these next couple of victims that I'm going to tell you about now that really set things off in terms of investigating her. So it was two sisters named Dorothea and Claire Williamson. They went to Linda for treatment after hearing about the book that she wrote. Remember I mentioned Linda wrote a book. Apparently the sisters were pretty bad hypochondriacs, making them perfect targets for someone like Linda. The sisters were also apparently very wealthy. They eventually wound up at Linda's apartment in Seattle and started their treatment to cure them. Cure what? I have no idea. I couldn't find any documentation that they actually were afflicted with anything. Kind of like right now, how everybody thinks that they have intestinal parasites, and so they're taking dewormer and it's tearing up their insides. And so remember, everyone's treatment with Linda involves fasting. Apparently what little intake the sisters did get came from vegetable broth occasionally, and also Linda would show up and give them massages. Eliminate, aka beat them without mercy for hours. Eliminate. And also they received hours and hours of enemas as well. And I don't know how this happened, but at some point Linda apparently convinced the sisters to store their diamonds and real estate deeds in her own office. By the time Dorothy and Claire were emaciated and wasting away, Linda had gotten Claire to sign something in Claire's will, basically leaving Claire's monthly stipend to go to Linda. So eventually, thank goodness, a friend of the sisters named Margaret, she got word of what was going on and she tried to help the girls out, but by this point it was too late. Claire had died and Dorothea at that point was described as a human skeleton. That's a quote. At first, Dorothea had begged her friend Margaret to take her out of Linda's care, but I guess the next day when Margaret returned, Dorothea had like switched up and changed her mind and then said that she wanted to stay with Linda. We can probably assume that Linda was probably coercing people in some kind of way. And it was said that Linda was an intimidating woman, a lot of her patients actually were afraid of her and only stayed in her program out of fear. Margaret sounds like a good friend because Margaret pushed back on this and was like, no, I'm taking Dorothea. However, Linda pushed back on this as well, and Linda actually had more power here because Linda actually had, remember, she had power of attorney over Dorothea and her estate, and Dr. Hazzard actually had legal guardianship over Dorothea. So Margaret, still being the damn good friend that she was, she got in touch with Dorothea's uncle and he came to the rescue. So eventually the Hazzards did agree to let Dorothea go, but only for a small fee of $2,000. And this doesn't sound like a lot of money, but remember, this was in the early 1900s. So this amount today equates to about $62,000. The uncle was able to negotiate that figure down some, and they were able to take Dorothea away. And at this point, Dorothea weighed approximately 60 pounds. So where has the law been this whole time? Well, don't worry, because it's finally catching up to the Hazzards. Luckily, since Dorothea had survived her treatments with Linda, she could actually move forward with some legal proceedings because remember, she was rich. So in 1911, Dr. quote unquote, Linda Hazzard was arrested. A local headline read, "Officials expect to expose starvation atrocities. Dr. Hazzard depicted as fiend." So Linda went full social media influencer, being called out for unethical practices. She played the victim. She said that she was being persecuted because she was a successful woman, and traditional physicians resented her success and they hated her natural remedies. So translated to 2024 language, all of you are being haters and bullies. Multi-level marketing reps love to say that instead of taking responsibility for their stupid exploitative actions. In the comment section under my Jessica Hickson video also had plenty of people calling me a bully as well. So that getting defensive and completely not acknowledging or taking accountability for your terrible actions is something that we still see even to this day. So during the trial, Linda was such an arrogant little CNX Tuesday, she decided she wanted to take the stand in her own defense. And if you are a regular true crime consumer like me, you know this is like the worst thing that somebody on trial for horrible crimes can do. Luckily for her anyway, her lawyer did end up keeping her off the stand. But in my opinion, her wanting to take the stand, I feel like that just shows that she had absolutely zero remorse and just was completely full of herself and really didn't think she did anything wrong. She probably thought she could talk her way out of it. So even despite the trial and all of the accusations, Linda still had plenty of loyal followers behind her, and that is not surprising at all. If you've watched other episodes in this series of my channel, we always see that, and I bring it up a lot. Stanley Burroughs, Gary Young, Robert Young, no relation, the Church of Bleach people, every one of these quacks and charlatans who have hurt and harmed people, who have even killed people, like in the case of Gary Young, who took the life of his own newborn baby. These people had hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of loyal followers worldwide who know that information, but just don't care. It's unbelievable. It's mind-blowing to me. And you know, you guys, we're not talking about like a stupid little social media scandal here where they like made a controversial Instagram post. We're talking about like these people committed crimes. So after the trial was all said and done, ultimately Linda was convicted of manslaughter. But wait, there's more. While she was awaiting sentencing, she took the lives of two more people, an Ida J. Anderson and a Mary Bailey. At her sentencing, she went on to be given 2 to 20 years in prison and only ended up serving 2 years before being released. What? Get this. She was released because she got a full pardon from the governor. Unbelievable. So after all this, and with her newfound freedom, she and her husband Sam headed to New Zealand, where she continued to grift and scam people under the titles of physician, osteopath, and dietitian. The disrespect. She later went on to publish another book, and she ultimately made quite a comfortable living for herself. By the 1920s, she had actually made enough money to return stateside, and she went back to Seattle, Washington, where she then built a sanitarium facility, which was called Starvation Heights. And there she continued starving people under the guise of curing and treating their disease. Luckily, Starvation Heights burned to the ground in 1935. A few years after that, Linda started to feel icky, so she decided that she was going to treat herself and cure her ickiness by fasting. And she ended up passing due to starvation. So in a way, I guess you could say that she did a self-checkout, even though that was probably not her intent. So she died. So that was the horrible story of the terrible person known as Dr. Linda Hazzard. In researching for this video, I found that even today, her books are still available online and even far back in the dust-covered shelves of certain health food stores. I'm sure if you search hard enough, you can probably find a fan page online somewhere of her. This series continues to show me that human beings really suck. Sometimes they do. And people like Linda Hazzard 100% still exist today. These people never went away. They never will. But now in 2024, they have a much wider reach because they just go on TikTok or Instagram and become wellness influencers. So yeah, there it is. Let me know what you guys think. Drop more ideas of this series below. I think something I might do is I might start a Google Doc that you guys can like start adding to for the series, because Instagram comments or YouTube comments get lost, and that'll be a much easier way for you guys to kind of add people to the list of cases and people you'd like for me to talk about for the series. So if you made it to the end of this video, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. If you're still here, comment eliminate in capital letters with an exclamation point and scare everybody who left early. Thank you very much. I really appreciate you sitting down with me today. I hope you enjoyed this episode of True Science. I'll see you guys again probably next month for episode 12 of this series. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button. If you'd like to see more similar videos, hit the subscribe button. And I will see you all in the next one. Queen Lemon, over and out.
Oh, we just missed your big stretch. He's been very quiet. Onyx is like always my quiet guy. Like when he's down here chilling with me while I'm filming. He's my quiet man. Onyx, what you doing, bro? Hey. Whenever I get on the floor in front of Onyx or in front of Zeus or Alpha, they always love to get up and get in my face, but Onyx is like, nah. See, he just demands pets. What? Give your belly rubs because you're a good man. You're my good old man. He probably just wants me to stop bothering him. He's my cranky old man, aren't you? He's gonna be 11 this year. That's crazy. You don't look a day over 10. Bye. Oh! That's a big stretch.